Okay, so we have a critical issue that we were assigned, and it is closing the achievement gap. And so I want to kind of give you a little definition of what achievement gap is. It is defined as the disparity in performance between low-income minority students as compared to that of their peers on standardized tests. And that is from Michael C. Rodriguez. And we'd like to show you a little clip of Michael Rodriguez talking about our achievement gap.
It's from Minnesota. Go Golden Gophers.
Achievement gap stands in the way of that goal. The achievement gap is defined as the disparity in performance between low-income and minority students as compared to that of their peers on standardized tests.
The achievement gap is clearly complex. Everybody knows this. One of the things that makes it so complex is that it's multi-layered. There's so many layers. There's early childhood preparation. There's access to resources, literacy-rich environments in the home as children are developing, even before they go to school or preschool. Then there's the access to opportunities in school.
The College of Education and Human Development aims to be a leader in narrowing the achievement gap, both in Minnesota and across the nation.
The University of Minnesota is well positioned to be a national convener on the topic of the achievement gap. And so my role is to help support that effort, to help the university be a convener around this topic. In order to do this, I'm hoping that we can hold a handful of local roundtables, bring the local experts together, and begin to put some parameters around this thing we're calling the achievement gap. What are we all talking about? What are the boundaries of this? What's the scope? What's the depth? What can we do to identify the units, the individuals, the researchers in the college and around the campus that are working on this issue?
Make sure that doesn't play anymore. Okay, so with that short clip about achievement gap, we want to bring all of us professionals together to kind of brainstorm ideas on how to close that gap. So an achievement gap's impact on education. We have two essential questions that we'd like for you to think of while we are doing our presentation. The number one is, how can the implementation of the SIOP model support narrowing the achievement gap in your classroom or school? And hopefully this presentation of new teaching processes will model this. And number two, how is your cultural responsive teaching different than multicultural education or social justice education? Okay, so what we're going to do is the achievement gap has an impact on education by it's created dependent learners. So we've given so many scaffolds and strategies to some of our struggling students that they don't know how to work on their own and be independent. And so we need to talk about how we can change the dependent learner into an independent learner, and helping students of all race, gender, and socioeconomic status to find their brain power. Taking the dependent learner who needs scaffolding and teacher assistance to get contact, and pushing them to be independent learners whom use their own strategies when they are stuck. Okay, and then so we need to also look at another part of achievement gap, which is individualism versus collectivism. And so individualism, so both refer to the way in which our brains are wired within the deep culture group of orientation, but collectivistic societies emphasize relationships, interdependence within a community, and cooperative learning. Individualistic societies emphasize individual achievement and independence. So the United States as a whole is very individualism. We try to strive better for ourselves. And they've noticed that collectivism, a lot of cooperation, group work, seems to do better for our kids that are struggling. So what are some possible solutions to close this achievement gap? Well, we're going to talk about something called cultural responsive teaching. And so you're going to get a tree that we're going to pass out to everybody. And we're going to put together this tree and kind of look at some things that we need to keep in mind. And so the first thing that we would like to look at is surface culture. And so I'm going to give you a red pen, or if you can grab a red pen, and if you can jot down maybe 2 or 3, and you're going to add them to the top layer of your tree. They're the leaves, okay? And so this is the surface culture. Songs, holidays, cooking, talk styles. So maybe a few that either you use a lot already or bring into your curriculum. Different literature from different parts of the world. Doing drama, different games that tie into different cultures. Dance, food, looking at different hairstyles or clothing. Different music genres, just language in general, different stories from different cultures, clothing or art. If you can't think of any that are in your curriculum, maybe some that you would like to maybe implement and start putting into your curriculum, but maybe just 2 or 3 that you can write down as leaves. Pick one more, or I'll move those over to the side here. And the ones that you just wrote as leaves, these are your multicultural aspects. A lot of things that for a multicultural night at school, you'd probably have your families maybe talk about a little bit more, okay? So then we're going to dig deeper. We're going to go into the shallow culture. This is the trunk of the tree. And this is the part that just digs a little deeper, and those kids that are coming from different cultures kind of get it a little bit more when their brains are able to relax and get into the mode of learning. So knowing their personal space. And again, if you can use the brown pen to write down 2 or 3 that you are aware of or you want to become more aware of. Acceptable food sources, concepts of time, their relation with nature, the way they're able to handle emotions. Many cultures have different ways of eye contact. Different theories of wellness and disease. Being honest. Their tempo of work. Non-verbal communication. And even child rearing principles. So these are a little bit more complex than the first layer. They're a little bit more harder to get into, to dive into, okay? So picking a few of those, that would have been the trunk of the tree, we go into our deepest, our deep culture, the roots. This is what keeps the tree strong. And we are going to talk about some of these. Here's a green pen, so maybe you can jot down a few that you might want to learn a little bit more down here in the root section. Okay? So things that we'd like for you to think about when you're really in that level is higher powers, definitions of kinship, decision making, relationships with nature, world views, concepts of self, their relationship with animals, spirituality, cosmology, notions of fairness, and preference for competition or cooperation. So that's bringing into that individualism versus collectivism. Okay. All right, so thank you for jotting down a few of those. And what we'd like to talk about next is cultural responsive teaching, okay? And this is a process of 4 steps that we want you to maybe think about a little bit more next time you're going into doing some of your curriculum, okay? Number 1 is information processing. So we picked a little butterfly here because our brain has a lot to do with how information is able to be brought into our brains. So knowing how to strengthen and expand students' intellective capacity so that they can engage in deeper, more complex learning and get the students ready for flight. So if you can take that sticker and take that and put that on your paper so that we can get the students ready to take their flight, their brain power. And they should at the back maybe bend so you can
Nope.
take them off easier.
Thank you.
Okay. The next step that we'd like for you to become more aware of is learning partnerships. So here we have some little gardening gloves that have to do with our relationships with our students. We need to build trust. So if you can put that on your paper, building trust with students across differences so that the teacher is able to create a social, emotional partnership for deeper learning. The teacher and student need to work together. Okay. Next is awareness. We're going to have you put that on there or grab your awareness sticker. And awareness is understanding that we live in a racialized society that gives unearned privilege to some while others experience disadvantage because of race, gender, class, and language. So we just need to give more resources to those students. And the last one that we'd like for you to put on there is the little shovel, and that's community building. So if you could put that on there, creating an environment that feels socially and intellectually safe for dependent learners to stretch themselves and to take more risks. We need to dig deeper to know students and their families. Okay? If you want any more information on building relationships or difference between multicultural to culturally responsive teaching, how the levels of engagement work, or individualism versus collectivism, that's on the back of your handout that you can take. And then there's also on your page, which you don't have, there are QR readers so that you can, I don't have it with me, oh, right here. You have QRs, so that gives you a little bit more videos on cultural responsive teaching and how you can maybe implement that. Okay, so looking at our questions one more time, how can we implement the SIOP model to help become the dependent learners become more independent learners? Is just good teaching strategies and then taking away scaffolds when we are able to. And how is cultural responsive teaching different than multicultural education? We just dig deeper. So we're really used to multicultural, those leaves, that surface culture. We want to go into more of the shallow and deep culture. And that is the end.
Thank you. Did you see her the whole time? Or did you see me too?